As part of survival, organisms must be actively able to survive within their corresponding environments and ecosystems. If they are unable to do so, they will fail in the world's impromptu race to live. If you take a plant, for example, it may not exactly seem like it is alive, but it indeed has taken steps to ensure its survival and participation in the race of life. One of these steps is covered within Chapter 31, promptly titled Plant Responses to Internal and External Signals. Thus, the ability of a plant to perceive and respond to different instances of stress and through different stages of life. As a result, we found it fitting to model the processes which these plants go through in a metaphorical way through everyday interactions within the human world. You will see analogical examples portraying the plant's process in a simplified manner. The first is the presence and role of hormones within a simple plant organism.
In order for plants to effectively survive, they have a variety of hormones that allow them to interact with the environment they exist in. The hormones can be represented in a simple way within a boy meets girl scenario. First are the auxins, which in plants lead to bending and branching when they are exposed to certain stimuli such as light. This response to stimuli within plants is known as forms of tropism. For example, the reaction to light is known as phototropism. Within this interaction, the boy responds to the girl much like a plant as he bends towards her. The auxins can be seen at work in the way he reacts. Then there are cytokinins, which promote bud growth and slow organ death within plants. Their presence within the plant also helps control cell division and differentiation. The bud growth can be seen within the different interactions, as his growth encouraged to speak, but also his nervous demeanor as he approached her. There are also gibberellins, which are responsible for stem elongation, breaking seed dormancy, and using stored reserves. Out in the ecosystem, this helps plants undergo germination and stem elongation overall. The boy represents these as he breaks out of his own shyness in order to interact with her. In addition, there are the brasinosteroids, which are similar to the mammalian sex hormones, and they are also responsible for cell elongation and division. Brasinosteroids also help slow down leaf abscission caused by abscisic acid, in order to prevent the plant from shedding too many leaves. Within the scenario, the brasinosteroids is the driving point of the relationship and the motivation behind his attraction towards her. However, in the relationship example, the process could end up in one of two ways, which can also be described by two different hormones. First is the failure of the relationship. This is represented by the rejection of the boy and his disappointed reaction towards being rejected. In plants, the hormone known as abscisic acid is responsible for this kind of reaction and causes several forms of reactions towards forms of drought. This includes stomatal closure, seed dormancy, senescence, the timed death of cells within the body, and leaf abscission, the shedding of leaves during the change in seasons. On the other hand, if the relationship succeeds, then this is represented by the hormone known as ethylene. In a plant, this mediates fruit ripening. Ethylene acid therefore represents the growth of a new relationship and the ability to overcome adversity within its life. In more stressful situations, ethylene helps plants undergo a process known as the triple response. For example, if a plant grows underneath a rock, it can use this response to first slow stem elongation, then thicken the stem and the base of the plant, and finally affect the curvature of the stem so that it can grow horizontally in a way that it can avoid the obstacle. In this scenario, ethylene therefore represents the growth of a new relationship and the ability to overcome adversity within a lifetime.
Responses to light are critical for plant success.
Light is a very important factor in the lives of plants. In addition to being essential for photosynthesis, light further triggers photomorphogenesis, which are key events in plant growth and development. Plants are able to detect the presence of light, its wavelength, intensity, and a graph called action spectrum reveals the effectiveness of different wavelengths, and in the case of photomorphogenesis, action spectra reveal that red and blue light are the most important colors for plants. The two major classes of photoreceptors are blue light photoreceptors and phytochrome photoreceptors. Light photoreceptors are proteins designed to perceive light and signal biological effects in the plant. The Blue light initiates the light-induced opening to the stomata, also referred to as phototropism, as well as the light-induced slowing of the hypocaudal elongation, which occurs when a seedling breaks ground. Phytochrome photoreceptors are proteins that are used to detect light, and they are responsible to regulate many plant responses to light, including seed germination and shade avoidance, which is a response of a plant when they are subject to the shade of. In addition to helping plants detect light, phytochrome photoreceptors help a plant to keep track of days and seasons. Many flowering plants use phytochrome to regulate the time of flowering based on the length of the day and night. The flower responses of many flowering plants are controlled by night length, and flowers need to have certain hours of continuous darkness in order to flower. Short-day plants require a night longer than a critical length to flower, while long-day plants need a night length short.
Plants respond to a wide variety of stimuli other than light.
During a drought, a plant responds with APA production and reducing water loss by closing the stomata, which is represented here by a girl closing herself from the outside world. Although these plants' responses conserve water, they also reduce photosynthesis, which is one reason why a drought diminishes crop yield. Too much water for a plant can be problematic, since the plant can suffocate, as it is shown here, by being trapped in an elevator for a long period of time. During flooding, the plant responds with the formation of air tubes that help roots survive oxygen deprivation. During salt stress, the plant is starving and responds by avoiding osmotic water loss by producing solids tolerated at high concentrations. However, most plants cannot survive salt stress for long. The exceptions are halophytes, salt-tolerant plants with adaptations such as salt glands that pump salts out across the leaf epidermis. As for heat stress, the plant cells begin synthesizing heat shock proteins, which reduce protein denaturation at high temperatures. It is being represented here by the simple scenario of a girl waiting for the bus in this Arizona heat. When a membrane cools below a critical point, membranes lose their fluidity as the lipids become locked into crystalline structures, which in this case the character represents that by being inside a cubicle. These structures they form help avoid osmotic water loss and produce antifreeze proteins.
Plants respond to attacks by herbivores and pathogens.
Defense mechanisms have evolved through natural selection. The epidermis and the periderm are the first line of defense, and the second is chemical to prevent the spread. Physical defenses include thorns and trichomes. However, plants produce distasteful or toxic chemicals to deter herbivore attack, or chemicals that attract animals that eat herbivores. Pathogens that the plant has little specific defense against are virulent, and others that may harm but not kill the plant are considered avirulent. Specific resistance is triggered by gene-for-gene recognition, where an AVR effector protein is identified by an R protein of the plant. It sends a series of signals through signal transduction pathways that set off a hypersensitivity response and a systemic acquired resistance. In a hypersensitive response, the infection is sealed off and both the pathogen and host are destroyed in that region where localized death has occurred. Systemic acquired resistance is a generalized defense response in organs distant from the infection site. The response is effective because it causes a plant's widespread expression of defense. The genes are used to protect against a wide variety of pathogens with long-lasting responses.